Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Colleen.
Okay, can you see me?
I can see you. Can you see me?
I've got Candy Tippets here.
All right, we're good.
Hey, I don't see your picture, but I see the little thing down in the corner.
Well, let me see if I can fix that. Although, I don't really care if you see me or not.
Oh, hey, I want to. Well, like Andens Erickson. Hey, how you doing?
Hi. Good
Hi.
job getting signed on. We missed you last time.
I know. Hey, I missed you too. I was living with the weather.
Oh, it happens.
You bet. I can't believe I got this on my first try.
You're doing so great. You're going to be an expert soon.
See, I'm proud of myself.
Good job.
The old dinosaurs got it. I think. Wait till next time. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
All
low
right.
Key. Yeah, low key. My boyfriend's working from home now, so that's been a transition.
Oh, now do you work from home as well?
Actually, I don't have a job currently, but
Okay.
he's in my space all the time, so you can.
Okay.
That's a transition.
I can
We get
relate.
that.
I was going to say that's
Yeah.
a transition.
Definitely is a transition.
Okay, I'm
Oh,
gonna give it another minute or two to let Robin and Dustin. Wow, I'm out of it today. See if they join in soon.
There's
Oh,
Robin.
one. Yes. So we'll give it just another moment.
I can't figure out why you can't see me, but it's okay.
Yeah, we can't see it. That's so weird.
I know. And I can't figure out why you can't.
huh.
So we're just going to pretend that I look really good.
Sure you
Well,
do.
you do.
There I am. God.
See, you do look really good.
Well, I'm down here all bundled up in the basement. So
Oh, right. Well, it's good to see everybody, just about everybody.
All right, since we at least have a quorum, I'll just get us started, and when Dustin comes in, we'll just make sure that we note that. So, let me get here. It is 7:02, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Midvale City Planning Commission to order. I've been asked by Midvale City staff to read the following. This meeting will be an electronic meeting without a physical location pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-207, as amended by HB 5002. I, Chairman Zach Smallwood of the Midvale City Planning and Zoning Commission, hereby make the determination that conducting the meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based upon the fact that the city is unable to ensure compliance with the guidelines and public health protocols mandated by the state's current risk phase. As restrictions limiting public gatherings occur across the state, Midvale City wants to ensure everyone interested in participating in planning commission meetings can do so. Public comments are read into the record by city staff during the public hearings portion of the meeting. If you would like to make a public comment, please send an email to Alex Murphy at amurphy, that's AMURPHY @midvale.com. When commenting, please limit your comments to 400 words. That equates to about 3 minutes. Include your first and last name. Include your city of residence if you'd like, that's optional. Also include the name of the agenda item so city staff know when you want your public comment want to be read into the record. City staff will read into the record the equivalent of 3 minutes. Your input is important to us, so please make sure your comments are concise. And with that, Kate, if you would take a roll call vote, please.
I can. Chair Smallwood,
Here.
Vice Chair Tippett,
Here.
Commissioner Costello,
Here?
Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
Commissioner Snow, Commissioner Erickson,
Here.
and Commissioner Benson.
Here.
Great. So right now we'll mark Commissioner Snow as excused for the time being, and unless Alex, have you received anything or heard anything yet?
I have not, so we'd actually mark him as absent on this one.
Okay, let's mark him absent for now until we possibly hear further. So to keep the meeting as orderly as possible, I will ask that everyone in the Zoom meeting mute themselves when not speaking. This makes it easier for everyone to hear and to transcribe the meeting in preparation of the minutes. I'd also ask that the applicants state their name for the record before speaking or answering a question. For this meeting, the process for the public hearing items shall proceed as follow. I'll introduce the item, followed by a presentation by staff. The attorney's office will then provide some additional information on the Planning Commission's role for the item. The applicant will be allowed an opportunity to present. I will open the public hearing. Then we'll take any public comment, and it will be closed after a motion by the commission. The commission will then have any additional discussion. I will then ask for an action on the item. A vote will be taken, and I will announce the decision. So with that, we'll jump right in. So first agenda item is Mark Garza with Holmes Jordan Bluffs LLC requesting approval to subdivide property located at 752 West Bingham Junction Boulevard into 18 lots. And I believe Alex has taken this one. So I will turn it over to you.
Great, thanks. I thought I just saw Commissioner Snow joined us. Let's give him a second. I see dots moving, so we'll see if that works. Okay. Thanks, Chair, and good evening, everybody. I'm going to share this screen real quick. So as the Chair mentioned, we've got this preliminary subdivision plat for an 18-lot subdivision. This is for what we had previously been calling the Holmes Homes project on Jordan Bluffs. I think now they have a new name. They're calling it Jordan Heights at View 78, but it's the same project that we went through the large-scale master plan and then staff reviewed site plan applications for over the course of this year or so. This is the first phase of that project. If you'll remember, this is down at the southeast end of Jordan Bluffs where Bingham Junction Boulevard meets 700 West. This was a 3-phase project with 360 units, condo units involved. So the first phase is about half of those units in, as you can see here, 18 buildings. This subdivision is intended to simplify the condominium platting process by creating lots for each building that can then be subdivided up into condo plats, as you'll see we have on the agenda for the next couple items. And as we've already gone through the site plan review process and large scale master plan, there's not really a whole lot of things to talk about on this one. We did verify that it meets all of the requirements of Title 16 and Title 17. We do have many of those requirements already taken care of as part of that site plan review. City engineer and the fire marshal have reviewed the plat and given some technical items to address as part of the plating process, but nothing else of significant importance. The one somewhat unusual aspect of this plat is what we have here identified as private roads. In the zoning ordinance, a private road has some improvement requirements that were not required as part of this review because we weren't considering them private roads at the time. Our emergency responder or our emergency response coordinator and the county addressing department like to see private roads for those purposes. And so what we've got here are these, what we considered access drives identified as private roads with the note on the plat that says they're only private roads for emergency response and addressing purposes and not according to the zoning ordinance, just so that it's clear why we have them labeled this way and why they don't have like the street trees and sidewalks and such that would be required of a typical private street. Other than that, we've got the usual requirements for utility notices and water and sewer letters, which we tend to cover during the final plat review process, and a pretty basic subdivision. So staff recommends the Planning Commission forward a recommendation to approve this preliminary plat. This will need to go to the City Council as both a preliminary and a final plat. So you'll have a recommendation and then we'll take it to the council twice, probably next month and the month after. Any questions?
Any questions for Alex? Doesn't look like it. And then just real quick, just so the record can show it, Dustin, can you just unmute and say that you're here for the record?
Dustin Snow here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, so with that, we'll let Garrett with the attorney's office just speak to this item real quickly.
Yeah, so I'm just going to speak to all three of the items on tonight's agenda since they're all pretty much the same. These are all administrative reviews, which means that we're just looking to make sure that they comply with our ordinance. If they comply with our ordinance, we have to approve them. And if there's any conditions or whatnot, then we'll note those on the record and go from there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I will invite Mark Garza to, I'd say step forward, but there's nothing to step forward to. So by all means, is there anything you'd like to add or bring up in front of the commission at this point?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just thanking staff for all their efforts, and it's been a pleasure working with every one of you. So no, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Perfect. And are there any questions for Mark from the commissioners or anything? All right. Cool. All right. So if there are no objections, I will go ahead and open up the public comment portion of this item. This is the portion of the agenda that allows any person to express ideas, concerns, comments, or issues. If you would like to comment on a public hearing item, you will be allotted time during this portion of the meeting. Please email your comments to Alex Murphy at amurphy@midvale.com. We will not be taking public comment on the Facebook or YouTube feeds. When commenting, please limit your comments to approximately 400 words, which is about 3 minutes. Include your first and last name, and if you'd like, you can include your city of residence. And include the name of the agenda item. City staff will only read into the record the equivalent of 3 minutes, so please be concise with your statements. And with that, have we gotten anything so far, Mr. Murphy?
We've not. This notice, there's not a whole lot of property owners within the notice boundaries, so we didn't send too many out. And I haven't heard anything from anybody that received it or might have seen it on the website or other sources.
Okay. Then I will leave this open as long as the commissioners feel, my fellow commissioners feel is adequate. So.
This is Dustin. I move we close this public comment.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Dustin and seconded by Colleen to close the public hearing portion of this item. Kate, if you would take a roll call vote, please.
I certainly can. Vice Chair Tippett,
Yes.
Commissioner Costello,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Snow.
Yes.
Perfect. That passes unanimously. So that public comment portion of this item is now closed. And we'll just bring it back up here. These seem pretty straightforward. I don't have anything really to add. Unless the commission has anything to add, I'd entertain a motion for this item.
I'll make a motion. This is Colleen Costello. I move that we adopt the findings and conditions of approval presented in the staff report, recommending the city council approve the preliminary subdivision plat for the Jordan Bluffs condos phase 1 subdivision with conditions.
This is Candy. I'll second.
Great. It's been moved by Colleen, seconded by Candy. Kate, if you would take a roll call vote, please.
I can. See. Commissioner Costello,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Snow,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Tippett.
Yes.
Perfect. That passes unanimously. So we will the commission will forward a positive recommendation for to approve the preliminary and final subdivision for that. And we'll see you in just a second, Mr. Garza. So we'll move on to agenda item 2, which again is Mark Garza with Holmes Jordan Bluffs LLC, requesting approval to condominiumize property located at 8395 South Iris Lumi Lane into 10 units. And I will say, I sat there and said condominiumize out loud like 4 times to make sure that I could say it. So there you go. By all means, Alex, take it away.
Microsoft Word did not like that term, but
It
I
does
couldn't
not.
think how else to describe it.
So therefore, I don't like that word.
Okay, well, as the chair mentioned, this is a request to condominiumize the first building in that project that we just talked about. So we're looking here at lot 10, which is that southeastmost corner on the intersection of Bingham Junction and 700 West. And this request would just separate the lot that is created through that subdivision that we just talked about into condo units, which would allow for each of the units within that building to be sold to individual owners. Condo plats are reviewed the same way as subdivision plats. So we go through the preliminary and the final condominium plat process. They have all the same requirements, which have all largely been satisfied through that site plan review. On this one, there is a requirement for all condos to have a draft declaration recorded in conjunction with the plat. We don't have that document yet, so it is a recommendation, or it's one of the recommended conditions of approval to have that declaration prepared as part of the final plat so that we can make sure to get that reviewed by staff and the city attorney and then recorded when the plat is recorded. Otherwise, everything's the same. We have the same utility notice requirements, the same review process, the same recommendation to approve, same recommendation to recommend approval to the city council of this preliminary plat. Any questions?
Any questions for staff? All right. All right. I do have a quick question, Alex. I know that we had talked about, and it might just be too late for this item, but we couldn't hold both public hearings for this second one and the third one together, right?
No, they need to have separate processes because they're separate applications. And technically separate requests.
Okay.
So the fact that they're adjacent to each other doesn't really have any impact on the procedural requirements.
Okay, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, trust me, I looked because we're gonna have about, I think I said
16
somewhere
more?
between 30 and 40 actually,
Oh,
because we have to
awesome.
do phase 2 and 3 to finish it out.
Perfect. This will be so much fun.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
I think we'll only have 1 or 2 at a time, maybe 3
Okay.
as we move forward, just so we can kind of try and concentrate them in this fashion like we're doing tonight, instead
Sure.
of having one every month for the next 5 years.
Okay. Okay. Then with that, I will skip over Garrett's thing. He said he mentioned this is for all three. It was an administrative thing. So, are there any comments for Mark Garza at this point? Questions? Didn't think so, but wanted to make sure. Okay, then I will go ahead and open up the public portion of, or the public hearing portion of this item. This is the portion of the agenda that allows any person to express ideas, concerns, comments, or issues. If you would like to comment on a public hearing item, you will be allotted time during this portion of the meeting. Please email your comments to Alex Murphy at amurphy@midvale.com. Excuse me. We will not be taking public comment on the Facebook or YouTube feeds. When commenting, please limit your comments to 400 words, which is the equivalent of 3 minutes. Include your first and last name, and you may include your city of residence if you'd like. Also include the name of the agenda item. City staff will only read into the record the equivalent of 3 minutes, so please be concise with your statements. So with that, we will leave it open as long as the commission feels is appropriate.
I suppose I should mention that I have not received any comments on this one.
Yes. Hey, have you received any comments?
I have not.
Okay.
This is Robin. I move that we close the public hearing.
This is Candy. I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing portion of this item. Kate, if you will take a roll call, please.
Yes, Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Snow,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tippett,
Yes.
and Commissioner Costello.
Yes.
Great, that passes unanimously. So this public hearing portion is now closed. So we'll bring it back up here for any discussion or a motion.
This is Candy. I'll go ahead and make a motion.
I heard you shuffling papers. I thought you would.
Okay, I'm ready. I move that we adopt the findings and conditions of approval presented in the staff report, recommending the city council approve the preliminary condominium plat for the Jordan Bluffs Phase 1A condominium with conditions.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved by Candy and seconded by Colleen to recommend to forward a positive recommendation to the city council for the proposed 10 condominium units. So, Kate, if you'll take a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Commissioner Snow,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tippett,
Yes.
Commissioner Costello,
Yes.
and Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Perfect. That passes unanimously. So that will move right along. And we'll just jump right into agenda item number 3, which is, now I lost my page. There we go. Mark Garza with Holmes Jordan Bluffs LLC, requesting approval to condominiumize property located at 741 West Sky Mirror Lane into 10 lots. And Alex, feel free to take it away on this one.
For efficiency's sake, I'm just gonna say that this is the same as the last one, only on a new lot. So the last one we just looked at was lot 10 here on the corner. This one is for lot 15. It's gone through the same review process and had the same comments and recommendations come out of it, which is recommend approval to the city council with the declaration condition and the utility conditions, and then responding to the comments that the city engineer and fire marshal provided. Any questions?
Just because, oh, just kidding, I can read it there, never mind. I was just wondering what the easement was, but I can read it right there. So that was just curious, but I see that.
Yeah,
So that's great.
we're looking at this one. You can,
Yeah.
so I didn't really show you the second page, but the second page of condo plats just shows the layout of the building inside.
Okay. Any questions for Alex at this point? We'll do
No.
Alex or the applicant. How about that?
Neither.
Okay. All right. So if there are no objections, I will again open this up for a public comment portion. I feel silly reading this so quickly right after each other. So this is the portion of the agenda that allows any person to express ideas, concerns, comments, or issues. If you would like to comment on a public hearing item, you will be allotted time during this portion of the meeting. Excuse me. Please email your comments to Alex Murphy at amurphy@midvale.com. We will not be taking public comment on the Facebook or YouTube feeds. When commenting, please limit your comments to approximately 400 words, which is about 3 minutes. Include your first and last name. And if you'd like, you can include the city of residence that you live in. Also include the name of the agenda item so we can get it have it on the right item. The city staff will only read into the record the equivalent of 3 minutes, so please be concise with your statements. So with that, the public hearing portion of this item is now open, and I will leave it open as long as the commission feels it is necessary.
I have not received any comments.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Candy. Seeing no comments on items 1 or 2, I move that we close the public hearing on item 3.
All right, it's
No,
been moved
second.
and seconded by Dustin Snow to close the public hearing portion of this item. So Kate, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Vice Chair Tippett,
Yes.
Commissioner Costello,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Snow.
Yes.
Perfect, that passes unanimously. So that will go on to city council, and looks like you win the day, Mr. Garza. Congratulations.
Chair, that was to close the public hearing.
Just kidding. Just kidding. Thank
We
you.
need a motion.
You don't win the day yet. Sorry. So the public hearing portion of this item is now closed. So I would bring it back up here for a real motion on action. And yeah.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. This is Candy. I move that we adopt the findings and conditions of approval presented in the staff report, recommending the city council approve the preliminary condominium plat for the Jordan Bluffs Phase 1B condominium with conditions.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Candy and seconded by Colleen to recommend approval for this item. Now, here we go. So with that, Kate, if you'll take a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Costello,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Snow,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Tippett.
Yes.
All right, so that now passes unanimously. So we will go ahead and forward that on to the city council. And congratulations. I'm looking forward to seeing this project come forward. So
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
You bet.
perfect.
You.
Great. So that concludes the public hearing items this go round. So we will move on to our discussion items. So the first is agenda item number 4, which is a land use training being conducted by Midvale City staff. Garrett Wilcox will be conducting that. So I will turn the time over to him.
Thank you. So some of you may remember Leslie introduced me just shortly before she retired. So about March of this year, and I've now been attending Planning Commission since then. So this is my first opportunity to really kind of talk more than say something awkward and feel stupid about it. So hopefully you guys can bear with me. So tonight we're going to be talking about some land use training tonight. We're going to be going through a lot of things. So first we're going to begin with property rights. Then we're going to talk about the role of planning. Then we're going to talk about your role as a planning commission, and then break down the type of decisions that you're making, specifically looking at legislative and administrative decisions, looking at the record, what the difference between those types of decisions are, and then some additional legal kinks that you're probably going to run into from time to time and kind of how to handle that. We're going to quickly talk about appeals. That won't have any impact on you, but it's good to know kind of how this works. And then ethics and open and public meetings. Now, you guys are all probably bored out of your mind, and rightly so. So this is going to be broken up probably into two different training sessions. We'll get through what we can tonight and then pick up what we leave off another night. So everything that we do, whether as a city when it comes to land use or what you do as a planning commission, all has its foundation in property rights. Now, when we're talking about property rights, it's somewhat difficult to define because it entails a lot of different things. It's a lot of different rights that have been bundled together. In law school, my real property professor would like to call it a bundle of sticks. You can take these sticks and you can separate them out. So for instance, anyone who rents property, for instance, they have one of those sticks from the actual property owner. They have the right to enjoy that property for the lease period, but the property owner has all the other rights associated with that property. So some of the things that you may think of when thinking about property rights: the right to possess your property, the right to control your property, the right to use your property, and so on. Now, this is going to sound like I'm stating the obvious, and it is, but it's sometimes when we start splitting up these rights, it becomes a little bit more difficult to understand who are we protecting. We're protecting whoever owns that property right, if that makes sense. So if someone is a renter and their property right in being able to use that property is being violated by the property owner, we're protecting the renter, if that makes sense. If there are other people that are coming onto that property or neighbors or things along those lines, we're protecting the property owner. We're not protecting the people adjacent to it or who have no relation with the property. Now, property rights have a number of legal protections. The broadest and the most important are our constitutional protections. The Third, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment all have protections for your property from the United States Constitution. So you're free from quartering soldiers in your home during peacetime, Hopefully none of us have ever had to deal with that. Hopefully we never will, but that protection exists for you. You're free from unreasonable searches and seizures, meaning the police can't come on your property and search your house without a warrant or without some sort of exigent circumstance. And under the Fifth Amendment, the government can't take your property without giving you just compensation. So the Utah Constitution has two of those similar protections found within it, the free from unreasonable searches and seizures, and also from your property can't be taken without just compensation. Now, when we move to the Utah Code, we see a lot of additional protections that have been added. So these are statutory protections that can be changed by the Utah State Legislature by a majority vote. So we have things that deal with your fences. We have certain powers as municipalities. Many of you have probably heard of LUDMA or the Land Use Development and Management Act. That's where a lot of your powers as a planning commission are authorized from. The county has a similar act that grants it the same powers for unincorporated property. Everything you've probably gone through with whatever real estate transactions you've been involved in, whether it's home ownership or executing a lease or whatever, those are going to be found, the guidelines for those are going to be found under the state code as well. And everything going through that, all the way through things like eminent domain, the legal procedures for that and protections, these are all found within the Utah Code. Now, at the city level, we have additional protections. You guys are very familiar with at least two of these titles because you deal with them all the time. So Title 16 and Title 17, so the subdivision code and the zoning code, these provide certain protections for property owners as well. There's also additional things found for animals, health and safety, vehicles and parking, and construction codes and whatnot that are all found at the local level. Okay, so with this in mind, this is where I'd like to, so from time to time, I'm going to have these hypotheticals to just make sure we're all on the same page. And so here's the first hypothetical. In the last zoning update, Midvale officials and staff didn't notice a large piece of property zoned clean industrial in the middle of a single family residential neighborhood. The property owner has submitted a complete application to build a warehouse on the property. The neighbors are furious. Is there anything the city can do to stop it?
I'm going to say no.
And why do you say no, Commissioner Snow?
Was it about a year ago that I think it was Mill Creek that had a similar thing to this where they put a commercial garage in somebody's residential backyard and they couldn't go back on that. So basing it off of that, strictly,
perfect.
I guess.
Perfect. Does anyone else have anything they would like to add or any other thoughts?
What kind of rights do the neighbors have in a case like that? Any at all?
That's a good question. What do you think, Commissioner Costello?
Well, I would think that, you know, in as much as it's zoned single family residential neighborhood, that something of a warehouse would be in conjunction with a business or dealing with a business, and that would not fit into the single family residential neighborhood.
And I think generally you would be correct. I mean, as far as I know, we wouldn't allow that. The one kicker in this question is that there was this piece of property was zoned clean industrial, and we all missed it and didn't change it appropriately. So would that change your answer?
It probably wouldn't change the way I would feel about it, but insofar as it was zoned for this, there wouldn't be too much of a, there wouldn't be too much that the residents could do about it because of the already zoned property.
Yep, and you nailed it right on the head, both you and Commissioner Snow. So because we protect private property rights and the property owner is within their right to develop the property for what it's zoned for, I think all of us would probably be horrified if this happened. And so I think this is all why we take our jobs very seriously to make sure that something like this doesn't happen. But both you and Commissioner Snow are right in the sense that because property rights protect the property owner, despite this being something that I don't think anyone would be in favor of, they would be able to proceed because they have that application and because it's vested. Okay, so now moving to the next portion of this, we're going to talk about planning in general and how this is based on property rights and how planning and zoning ordinances kind of fit together. So the state has retained, when the country was created, the state retained what's called police powers. So these are powers that allow us to provide for the safety, health, prosperity, morals, peace, good order, comfort, convenience of the city, residents, and to be able to protect property. So this allows us to kind of operate in all of those areas in which the Constitution doesn't directly speak to. The state has delegated those same powers down to the local level. And so that's where our zoning authority is based out of, are these police powers, being able to make sure that we are planning for people's safety, for their health, to make sure that property values are maintained, that businesses can function correctly, that industry can happen, and that this is all, that we can do all of these things simultaneously without stepping on each other's toes. So the main purpose of planning goes back to is based in a case with a city called Euclid. And essentially they wanted to break things up into, say, we're going to have our residential here, we're going to have our commercial here, and we're going to have our industrial here. So they wanted to separate the residential from the industrial uses because of the effects that came from that. And that was upheld as a good use of police power. And so since that time, planning has kind of been an effort to separate incompatible uses from one another and allow compatible uses to be placed next to each other. So that way, for all those reasons I mentioned before, people can enjoy their property. So obviously, so some of these we can look at and see that in the past or even currently, there's been some times in which uses have not probably, I don't know the situation in some of these, but I know, for instance, I would not want to live next to a factory and have smoke wafting through my kitchen window while I'm getting ready to eat. Or I would not love to come out of my backyard and have my kids staring at a landfill. Or being in a skyscraper and having a train yard next to it with the constant rumbling. Maybe that's just personalizing some of my own fears, but those are all things that when we're planning, that we're trying to keep in mind of what makes sense being put together and what things need to be distanced away from other uses or buffered from other uses, so that way everyone can enjoy their property. Now, one of the other great things about planning is when we plan, we're looking to improve the quality of life. This isn't some sort of contrary to popular belief, planning is not SimCity where you get to kind of play around and you don't have any feedback from your Sims. Residents very much care about the way their community develops. And I know you as planning commissioners very much care about the way Midvale develops. And so this is one of the beautiful parts about planning is when we can figure some of these things out, we can provide for open space, we can provide for trails, we can provide for parks, we can provide for things like commercial areas so that people can easily get groceries or fulfill their needs for their family. We can provide job centers, we can provide stable neighborhoods and encourage transit, things that improve our quality of life. And so that's one of the goals of planning as well, not just to separate uses, but also to hopefully make everyone's lives a little better. Now, in Midvale, we went through that process 4 years ago where we updated our general plan. So I don't know how many of you were on the Planning Commission at that time, but I know that this was quite an endeavor of going through getting a lot of community input about what areas are good, what areas need improvement, where do we have opportunities to improve, and what are some of our priorities moving forward. And so this general plan then informs some of the other things that we're doing. So this general plan, this broad goal that was established by the city with input from residents, the Planning Commission, the City Council. This is saying, moving forward, this is what we'd like to see happen in Midvale. And it informs the other things that we do. So like our housing plan that was completed last year, some of the efforts that the RDA is making with trying to revitalize Main Street and downtown, some of the opportunity areas that have been identified along the State Street corridor along 7200 South. These are all things that we've identified in our general plan as priorities, and these priorities should then be used to inform our zoning ordinances. So if we're wanting to see changes in these areas, it means we should be changing our zoning code to reflect those priorities. And so, as you guys are well aware, we have a lot of zoning ordinances and a lot of them match those different priorities. So I know recently we went through that form-based code for the downtown Main Street area in order to incentivize and change some of that to reflect our priority of making that a vibrant area and to encourage some of the different development that we don't generally allow in the rest of the city. So hopefully we will be seeing more residential and commercial mixed use types of infill and things along those lines. But these zoning ordinances should, like I said, should be informed by the general plan. So depending on what our priorities are, if we're looking for stability, it probably means that we're not looking to make changes. If we're looking to infill certain areas, then we're going to be looking to change our zoning code to allow for different setbacks, to allow for accessory buildings to be built, things along those lines. So now that we've kind of talked through all of those, one of the things that was identified in our general plan was that the State Street corridor from all the way from the northern part of the city to the southern part of the city, from Murray to Sandy, that entire strip was identified as a opportunity area. And despite this, there are several abandoned or vacant properties that continue to exist along State Street. Now, what are your thoughts on certain zoning changes that we could make as a city to incentivize the attractive development of these properties?
Tax credits.
Tax credits, okay? So the city can provide financial incentives to encourage development. What else?
I'd look into what Sandy and Murray have done because their State Street areas are fantastic.
So look at maybe their zoning code and
Right.
seeing what they're doing different from us and maybe make some adjustments. Great.
I don't really think as a developer very much, but I would think there would be some kind of marketing component if it's really important to the city to revamp these areas, to make people aware that it's even there. If you're not from Midvale, it may not be an issue that you're passionate about.
So in other words, have the city step in or the RDA step in and kind of promote those areas.
Correct.
Perfect. Great idea.
Yeah, and our economic developer, I think that he always has such good ideas as well. And, you know, I might just interject this little tidbit. I've been around forever. And I can remember there was a time when Midvale could have had Fashion Place Mall on 7200 South, because that was kind of a real prime area, 7200 and State. But of course, our city fathers at the time couldn't see that far down the road. So, you know, I definitely think these areas on State that are, you know, in the pictures here, I think could really be developed, you know, into something, you know, and, you know, as was mentioned with the tax incentive. And I think probably too, as we're going along and trying to get out of this virus epidemic, you know, maybe this is the time to really start thinking about on lines like this, where people might have more time to think about things like this. And it might be some good time to, you know, be able to do something with these. Because I think some of these areas that you're posted up here in the pictures, I think there could be real potentials there.
Absolutely. I mean, Midvale, like its motto says, in the middle of everything.
In the middle of, yeah.
I think has some, as we're seeing on, well, throughout the city, but especially right now, as you guys have been involved in the Jordan Bluffs development, and then prior to that, the Bingham Junction development. Midvale is not, it's not that Midvale is lacking in desirability. There's a lot of people who want to be here. It's a great location. So I appreciate all those comments. Those are all wonderful ideas. So some of the ideas that I thought of, and again, these are hypothetical solutions. These are not trying to throw any of my coworkers under the bus or anything like that. So just similar to Commissioner Benson, review our ordinance, see if there's some outdated language that's preventing development. Is there things that just don't make sense anymore? Are we doing something with being too restrictive, either with height or with setbacks, or maybe not allowing people to be creative about developing these properties? Do we need to look at changing the zone? Maybe we have it zoned the wrong thing. I don't know. Maybe this needs to be more commercial. Maybe this needs to be residential. I don't know, but maybe we have it zoned the wrong thing. And then, as many of you mentioned, what incentives can we consider to encourage development, whether it's financial or promoting this or whatever it may be? Those are all absolutely great things to think about. Now, we're going to shift now to how you play a role in all of those things. Property rights, planning, zoning ordinances. How do you fit in? So I know sometimes when people hear about the Planning Commission, for instance, my neighbors, they don't even know you guys exist. I think sometimes when you're on the Planning Commission, sometimes when some of these weird applications come to you that come out once a blue moon, I know there's been a few since my time here that I'm sitting here thinking, are we really having a public hearing on this? That, I mean, has shocked me. So as I mentioned before, your duties and powers are set by state code. I'm not going to go through this word for word, but essentially what it boils down to is the state has identified you as being an apolitical advisory body to the city council. They want you to not be getting lobbied per se, but be thinking about what is best for your community. How does that inform the general plan? How does that inform planning in general within your community? How does that inform zoning ordinances? And then as the city delegates, you're also an approving body or a reviewing body for certain applications that come through. But as you can see from what the state has said, your primary responsibility more often than not is to be a body that is looking out for the good of the community. So you're looking to protect property rights. You're looking to also be making decisions and advising the city council about what is the best thing for Midvale when it comes to planning, when it comes to zoning ordinances, when it comes to reviewing some of these decisions and some of these processes, what makes sense, what's fair, and so on. Again, this is just more talking about your responsibility to make sure that the application processes are fair and protect those property rights. Now, at the city level, in our zoning code, you've also been delegated some powers by the city council. So one of them is preparing that general plan and any amendments to the general plan. The second is recommending zoning ordinances and zoning maps and any amendments to those ordinances or maps. Making recommendations about the subdivision regulations, reviewing subdivision applications, reviewing conditional use permits, and then other duties kind of as assigned throughout Title 17. So how do you best fulfill that role? So you are an advisory body. You're appointed by the city council, and it's because of your job skills, your connection with the community, your ability to be fair, your ability to be willing to follow through with the law rather than whatever the political pressures may be. So the things you can do to best fulfill your role is to contribute. When we have things like this come up, the general plan, which I think we're hoping we're set for a little while, but with zoning ordinances, zoning maps, etc., we want your input. We want you to be asking questions. We want you to be considering these issues. We want you to be making sure that we're not missing anything, and also be making sure we're being forward thinking. There's going to be times that we're going to have knee-jerk reactions to certain applications that come through. We're also asking that you stop and think before you immediately respond, and that you're able to put aside your own biases. Now, that's not to say that we don't want to hear your opinion. But there are going to be certain times that there's going to be some of those applications like that first hypothetical that are going to come through that are going to be uncomfortable for us. And we need, because the law and those property rights are so important, we need you to put aside some of those things and just follow through. That just, again, make the right decision, not the popular one. Be patient. We want you to have passion. We want you to own your role as a commissioner. We want you to own planning within the city, our zoning ordinances. We want you to be pushing us as city staff, but also residents to take pride in the community and to improve those things. Knowing the agenda is a great place to start. I know all of you come very well prepared, but you could imagine how chaotic a planning commission meeting would be if none of us knew what was going to be discussed that night. You can set a great example for the community by establishing a civil and respectful tone. As planning commissioners, you can do an excellent job of encouraging citizen input when we have those, especially on legislative items. So things like zoning ordinances, zoning maps, things like that. Please encourage people to come and speak. Please encourage people to come and be and get engaged. So that way we can reflect everything that the community wants. And then the last thing is just to remain above the politics. Again, this is an apolitical body that's appointed by the city council. You're not elected. And the reason you're not elected is so that way you don't have to worry about will your constituents keep you or not. The point of being appointed is so that you serve at the will and pleasure, if you will, of the mayor and the city council. And so long as you're fulfilling that role, your role, they're not going to have any desire to remove you. If you can't fulfill your role, that's where that becomes a little bit of more of a trickier situation. But if you can remain above the politics and you're not campaigning against things that are coming up on the agenda, but you're remaining unbiased and objective, those are going to be the best, some of the best traits you can bring to the Planning Commission. Okay, so in summary, you guys have a lot of responsibilities. You see a lot of different things come through. Some of them are legislative, some of them are administrative, some of them are, you look at a lot of maps and a lot of plats. You have to review a lot of different things within the ordinances to make sure that they match. And you have to deal with public hearings and public input, and sometimes have to have thick skins. And so for all of that, sincerely, we as staff truly appreciate this, especially when none of you are being paid to be here tonight. So thank you for your time. Thank you for volunteering. I know it's not always a fun role to have. And in many instances, it may not even be a role that your fellow community members know that you're fulfilling on their behalf. So thank you. So now let's again talk about, let's do another question. So you're driving around Midvale and you notice a sign like this where someone has spray painted up gas pumps open. You think that this sign makes Midvale look unattractive and does not reflect well in the community. Concerned, you reach out to the city staff and are shocked to find out that this is allowed use under our zoning ordinance. What can you do?
This is Robin. So is it against the rules to just go pull the sign down?
Yeah.
You can do what you want. I may see you in court, though, in
Got
my
you.
other capacity as a
All right, I was just
prosecutor.
wondering.
Garrett, would it be possible to maybe discuss changing the zoning ordinance?
Absolutely. Yep. And then, so let me click through some of that. So absolutely, Candy, you could bring this and ask the Planning Commission, can we put this on the agenda to discuss about changing the zoning ordinance to change this, since I don't find it attractive. Now I'm assuming, oh, sorry, go ahead,
no,
Commissioner
I
Costello.
interrupted you. I'm sorry.
I'm assuming most of you would agree that this is probably not what you would want Midvale to look like. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Could I interject one thing?
absolutely.
Would there be a possibility of talking to the owner of whose gas pumps are open? That maybe something could be, worked out with the owner so as to put up something that would be more attractive and that would fit in.
Yes, so I mean, that's obvious. That's definitely a possibility. But it wouldn't be enforceable per se. So we could ask them and say, hey, would you please change this? But under our current zoning ordinance, they wouldn't be required to do so.
I
So-
wanted to add in also to caveat that just even if we were to change the zoning ordinance, they would that sign as permitted would still be allowed and to continue to go on as well. So that's important as well.
Yeah, so it goes back to those property rights that if you have an allowed use, and then we change the rules of the game, you get to continue to keep those property rights until you change them as well. So so this would be a non-conforming use, as Chairman Smallwood pointed out. But we can say this definitely shouldn't be in our code. We need to fix this so that so there's no other gas stations that are letting people know they're open by spray painting up their sign. So as Commissioner Tippett pointed out, we can put that on the Planning Commission agenda as a discussion item. We can then, you guys as the commission can then come up with language to fix that, discuss it, figure out what should be suggested, and then you can forward that recommendation to the city council to see that as a legislative body if they want to take action on that recommendation and change things.
So hypothetical back at you.
Yes.
So if it's approved by the city council, like after it goes through changing the zoning, and then it goes through the city council and is approved, and then it disappears, as Robin was saying, they would still have to go through the permitting to get it back the way it was. But it wouldn't be grandfathered in, essentially. Too hypothetical.
So let me just make sure I understand all the steps. And here, I'll stop distracting you with Kermit. So property owner has the sign. We change the ordinance. They want to change their sign and they ask that they can return it to its old state. So if they change their sign, they lose their non-conforming use. They have to bring up their sign to whatever our code says.
So it could disappear, but we still have to take action first.
Yeah, so anything that we just leave out there, people are entitled to keep until we change it.
And I think, and I don't mean to speak for you, Candace, but I think one of the questions were kind of where she was kind of going with that was, let's say that a disgruntled person went and physically removed that sign outside of that. Could they replace that sign as it currently is shown? I think I'm not sure if that's what you meant, Candace, but okay.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm sorry I misunderstood. So yes, if Commissioner Anderson decides to steal this one night
I don't know
we
why
would-
I wouldn't.
We'll let you continue to plead the fifth if you'd
Okay,
like.
Thanks.
So if this were to be destroyed or something along those lines, and it was not the property owner's choice, then yes, they have the right to bring it back to kind of that original state. They're not allowed to expand it. They're not allowed to try and do something different, but they would be able to restore it to kind of that existing state. So I apologize for misunderstanding your question.
It's all good. Thank you for the clarification, both Zach and Garrett.
Okay, so this gets to what Commissioner Snow had asked me in our last in our last meeting, if we would cover kind of when do public comments, when can we listen to those and take that into account, and when do we have to be careful about this? And so this is kind of the meat of, I think, what most people get hung up on and where they have the most questions. And Alex, I know I'm coming up a little bit on time, so you can tell me if we need to pick this up later or if you want me to get through this.
I think we can get through this part.
Okay. So you guys make two different types of decisions. Unfortunately, you've been hearing my voice calling out from the dark the last couple of meetings, telling you which category this falls into. This may not have meant a whole lot to you previous to this meeting, but hopefully this will make a little bit more sense now. So all the decisions that you make as a body fall into one or two categories. So they either fall into the legislative category, in which you are the advisory body, you're reviewing something and then making a recommendation to the city council, or it falls in the administrative body, where you are reviewing something against existing ordinances and determining whether or not the applicant is following our law. So the things, when we look at legislative decisions, things that fall in that category: general plan, zoning map, zoning ordinances. So all things that the city council will pass by an ordinance to change or update or adopt. These are very broad. This means that you have a lot of discretion. It means that we want as much input as possible. We want your input because of your expertise and your experience, but we also want the input of residents as well to say, hey, this is a really bad idea, or this is a really good idea, or if we tweak this here or we tweak this here, this is going to be much better product. And so we want as much input as we can from everyone involved in the process. When it comes to an administrative decision, we are applying the facts as they are against essentially a checklist of requirements that we've established by law. We don't have a lot of discretion. So, I mean, we can think about the subdivision plats that were just approved. We're looking for some pretty basic things. Does it meet our requirements in the sense of, does it, are those setbacks and things shown? Do they have the utilities they need? Do they have the fire access they need? Things along those lines, that we're looking for pretty basic set of standards in order for someone to be able to get a subdivision plat approved. Other things that you often see as well, or at least while I've been here, I know we've seen a number of conditional use permits come through. It seems like we've seen a lot of automotive shop related conditional use permits come through during the time I've been here. We're looking for very specific things. Do they have enough parking to be able to meet their needs without this spilling out onto the street or affecting their neighbors? Do they have a way to be able to take care of their trash correctly? Are they doing things so taking care of storage correctly? So that way we don't have broken down cars or whatnot that are visible. Are they all being moved into the shop? Things along those lines. Now, some of these applications we may not like, and the public may not like, but that's not the question that we're asking when we come to administrative rights. So, like I said, for legislative, we're looking, we have a lot of discretion. It's generally forward thinking of how can we improve things? What is our vision? What do we want to see as the final product? The administrative review, we're saying, does it do X, Y, and Z as we said it needs to? If it's doing X, Y, and Z, it has to be approved. If it's not doing X, Y, and Z, that's when we have a variety of things that we can do. I mean, I know I've seen the commission table items so that an applicant can fix it. I know we've approved things with certain conditions saying if you get Z taken care of, because you already have X and Y, you don't need to come back to us. But as soon as staff knows that you've taken care of Z, you can move forward. I don't believe I've seen any be denied so far, and that's probably a good thing. It means that our applicants are coming in well prepared, and you guys are applying the law as it should be. Now, this also leads to two different results. I know you guys take a lot of heat sometimes because there are some applications that come through that are not popular. And there are some that maybe fit a little bit closer to that first hypothetical, where when a zoning ordinance or whatever it may have been, maybe a conditional use permit or whatever it was, when it was originally envisioned, the product that ended up coming before the Planning Commission was not what was not what was intended per se. But because of those property rights, because that person has the right to move forward with their property under our rules, sometimes we have to eat kind of our own previous decisions and honor what we said we would do. So, but it means though, for our legislative decisions, when people come in and are upset, we need to listen. We need to figure out what's going on. We need to collaborate and figure out what's going to be best for Midvale. So obviously there's probably going to be times in which maybe a very vocal part of the community, but a minority of the community is coming in and saying, we don't want you to make this zoning change. We don't want you to do that. You as the Planning Commission have that role as being that advisory body to be thinking about, is what they are saying, is there legitimacy to this? Or are we going to recommend something else because we believe that moving forward with this zoning ordinance or this general plan or whatever it may be is in the best interest of the community, even if it upsets some people. When it comes to administrative decisions, on the other hand, that's when, unfortunately, when people show up and are angry, our hands are tied. There's not a whole lot we can do about it. We're stuck with the check boxes that we have, and we can't deviate away from those. Otherwise, we're violating someone's property rights. As uncomfortable as it may be at times, again, we're here to protect the property owner's property rights, not those who have the exact same property right but are frustrated that someone is exercising theirs, if that makes sense. So one of the things that we need to be mindful of as we move through this process is the record. Now, I know sometimes it feels a little bit stupid when we've gone through those roll calls and we're getting thumbs up but maybe we can't unmute ourselves or our picture isn't working. And sometimes it feels a little bit heavy-handed. Why can't we just accept a thumbs up as being good enough? And that's because the record is what justifies, thank you, Chairman Smallwood. This is what the record justifies, or the record is what should inform the decision. So whatever we are putting, whatever comments we're making, those that are present, the community members who are providing comments, as those are being taken onto the record, those are the things that when you make your final decision, you need to be looking back to when you make your decision, whether it's legislative or administrative. So in other words, if we're going to go through a zone change and you've been thinking, hey, this is a really bad idea, or maybe this is a really good idea, and you're not discussing it, you're not putting it out there. If you get to the end and it's not on the record, and then you're saying, I move that we do this, and then all of a sudden you're adding findings that have not been previously established, we could potentially have problems if it were to be litigated. So that's why your role as contributing, as speaking up, as commenting is really important, because that final decision, whether it's in a legislative process or administrative process, we need to be able to point back to and say, Commissioner Costello was concerned about this. Commissioner Erickson thought this was fantastic, and so on. So we can point to those items in the record, and same with public comment. So that's why it's so important for you to be an unbiased, apolitical body to avoid ex parte communications. In other words, if you know something's going to be on the agenda, you shouldn't be talking to your neighbor about it. You shouldn't be kind of coming up with your. You shouldn't be deliberating with anyone else, because everything needs to be done on the record. So if you have a neighbor come and talk to you and say, I'm really concerned about this project, say, great, I would love to hear from you. And I need it to be on the record, though, if you want me to do anything about it. So please submit a comment. Obviously, right now, electronically, please provide a written comment so we can get it in the record and we can address it as a planning commission. Or if someone says, hey, I really love this, say, great, please submit it, please come in, say it, put it on the record. So that way, as a planning commissioner, I can look back at it and I can either address your concern, or I can say, look, we have this type of support for this type of change, or whatever it may be. But if we're missing those things and we're suddenly bringing them up at the end in order to justify our decisions, that's when we're going to have some problems. So that's why it's so important. I'm not saying don't engage the community. I'm saying please encourage them to come and speak openly in front of everyone else, so that it can all be out there in the open and it can be addressed correctly. So I'm going to kind of move a little bit quickly through this, since we've kind of discussed a lot of these. Like I said, the general plan, this is the legislative decision. We generally don't touch it very often because it's such a large document and it informs so much. So anytime we touch the general plan, it's kind of like throwing a boulder in a lake. It's going to have a big splash and it's going to have lots of ripples down the road. So we tend to like to make this a big deal where we put a lot of time and effort into it at one time, and then allow those things to happen, and then give it some time to see how things work out before we throw another boulder back into the lake, if that makes sense. But this is from our last general plan. You can see the different opportunity areas that were identified. You can see that we were taking, well, you can't see this, but take my word for it. We were looking at demographics. We were looking at housing types. We were looking at things like that. We were looking at our existing zoning map. And then we came up with our vision. land use. How do we want our residential housing to develop? Our commercial and economic development, transportation, mobility, public facilities, parks, and open space. These are all things that we identified as priorities in 2016 that we wanted to see change in our zoning code and improve. So we've already talked about this a number of times as well with zoning ordinances. You guys handled one of these in our last meeting with some of the changes on Jordan Bluffs when it came to signs and fencing, lighting, things along those lines. These come through pretty often. And again, we want you to help us workshop these through so we end up with a product that the community enjoys and we don't end up with problems that we occasionally see with things that have slipped through or things that we didn't see coming when we were working through this process. Now, I know this is always frustrating when we talk about some of the standards. For legislative actions, we have a little bit, because we have that broader discretion, we can talk more in subjective standards to inform our final decision. When it comes to administrative standards, unfortunately, well, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess, depending on what side you're on, we are only looking at objective standards. So we may have subjective language, and we know that it comes up because at least while I've been here on a couple projects, it's been a hot item in which people have used subjective language to try and tell you, please don't allow this project to go through at an administrative permit level. And unfortunately, we can't use that language in order to justify a final decision. So we can't look at a subjective standard because it means we can change the rules of the game, if you will, and violate this person's property rights. Instead, we're looking at objective standards. We're looking at things that are clear, that we can clearly point to. So in some cases, it might be fencing height, maybe the amount of lighting, sufficient emergency vehicle access, which obviously our fire department has specific requirements saying we need this much width of a right of way, or we need to be able to turn our fire trucks around, or we need to be able to access the roof and so on. These are all objective requirements that we can take these standards and make administrative decisions based on. So some of the things that we see when we do administrative decisions, like we saw tonight, this was pulled out of tonight's packet, going through the subdivision process. We're looking at objective standards to see whether or not all those boxes are checked. Conditional uses. So like the automotive type of things, are they checking those boxes? The one thing that we need to consider with conditional uses is we are not going to deny someone's application outright if they don't meet all of the requirements per se. What we're looking for is, can they mitigate the impact of their use? So if there's increased traffic, have they done enough to mitigate that increased traffic that it doesn't have as negative of an effect on its neighbors? So more often than not, we can work with an applicant to mitigate those issues to a point that's comfortable for us and the community. If we're at a point that they're not willing to mitigate those impacts at all, that might be the only time that it's appropriate to deny a conditional use permit. Otherwise, if they're willing to work with us and we can find some sort of happy medium, we need to approve that permit with those conditions. Master plan developments, again, these are from a few weeks ago. We're looking at, do they check the boxes for a large scale master plan or small scale master plan, etc. Okay, so now for your favorite part, the hypotheticals. So a developer owns several single family lots adjacent to the city park at the corner of 7500 South and Jefferson. The developer has proposed tearing down the existing homes and building a 20-store apartment in their place. In order to complete this project, the developer has proposed a new zone. The neighbors are concerned about the impact on the neighborhood. Do you have to approve the developer's proposed zone and project?
No.
And why is that?
He's proposing a new zone. So it's not the existing zoning. He's asking us for a favor. In return, he's making the neighbors mad. We're doing our duty by listening to the neighbors.
It's also legislative and not administrative, because administrative is adhering to the zone that's been established and approved.
Exactly. So just as you guys mentioned, this is a legislative decision, so you have the discretion to maybe, so your role as the planning commission is to listen to the neighbors, take that into account, and then decide whether or not there's validity to what they're saying, and then to make your decision. So you may decide the neighbors may be upset, but maybe this is the direction that the city is wanting to go. And so we're gonna choose to not go with the neighbors and to approve this zoning request. But on the flip side, you may say, no, the neighbors are absolutely right. This is the worst thing that could happen here. And because because this is a legislative decision, you have the right to say, no, we're not going to recommend this for approval to the city council, and here's why. And again, that just links back to the record. It's important to get your concerns out there, so that way the city council knows why you're making the decision you're making. Okay, so slightly different fact pattern. A developer owns several single-family lots at the corner of 72nd and 3rd East. The developer has proposed tearing down the existing homes and building a 20-story apartment in their place. This type of development is permitted as a conditional use. The neighbors are concerned about the impact on their neighborhood. Can you deny the developer's proposal?
No,
And why is that, Commissioner Anderson?
because it's zoned for that.
Is
It
there
actually
any?
is zoned, 7230 East would be zoned for that specifically. I mean, you wouldn't want a 20-story, but he has the right to do that. Right?
Yeah,
He
so
is
it's
asking for a conditional use.
Yeah, so it is a conditional use. It is zoned for that. What can you do as the planning commission?
Yell at him? Oh, wait, I think I did.
Can't we check the code to make sure that this 20-story apartment building fits the code, even
Even though it might
Yeah.
be zoned?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could still be zoned
Right.
for an apartment building, but we have height restrictions.
That's right.
in our
Yeah.
code.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's
So absolutely. So Commissioner Tippett, you're absolutely right. One of the things you're doing as a planning commissioner is making sure is that objective standard of this height requirement, do they meet this? And Commissioner Anderson, you're also correct in the sense that if it's zoned for it, we can't outright dismiss it just because we don't like the project. We have to go through that checklist of saying all those, do they meet the conditions that the city has set? Now, let's say they do meet the conditions that the city has set. Is there anything else you can do for these neighbors?
Have a meet with the developer and see if they can come to terms on something less obtrusive.
Yeah, so I mean, we can always encourage them to go through some unofficial means and say, we can't hold you to this, but would you be willing to talk to the neighbors and figure something out? That's always a possibility. Is there anything else we can do? And so I'm going to say kind of. So assuming that it meets all the city's requirements, assuming that this is a conditional use, we probably can't outright dismiss it or deny it. But if they, but we're going to look for ways to mitigate those impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods. For instance, maybe if they have a driveway facing the adjacent single family home or something like that, we can say, look, that's going to have a huge impact on the quality of life for that person. Can we move that driveway maybe to an adjacent main street like 72nd or 3rd East to mitigate some of those impacts? Again, we're going to be looking at objective standards. So we're going to be saying, maybe can we put in some sort of landscape buffering or things like that if our ordinance allows for it. Okay, so a developer has submitted a subdivision application for approval. The layout is atrocious, but it meets all the standards of Midvale subdivision ordinance. You think that some tweaks to the layout would be a significant improvement for the future residents. Can you condition your approval on compliance with your suggestions?
Maybe if there's like a gray area on something that he's not meeting.
So yeah, so we're going to look at some of those objective standards, right? And say, is there any room? Does he really meet all of these, or are there any that are kind of some close calls that we can look for ways to massage it? That's a good idea. Anything else? Any other thoughts?
A lot of times they can kind of move things around at different angles, you know, and like for instance, if they have a green space, you know, with say equipment for children to play in or something like that, or if this is a subdivision, of course, they wouldn't have that, but maybe there's some way that they could, you know, redo some of the design to make it look better.
And would you be able to condition your approval on making that suggestion, or would it just be a suggestion to the developer?
I think
it would
it's just a
just be a-
suggestion. I
I
don't
think
think
it
you
would
can,
depend.
I don't think you can hold back. I think it just has to be a suggestion, say, gee, you know, we've been looking at it and it would be really nice to maybe change a couple of things, but I don't think we can hold back our approval
Yeah,
for one of our suggestions,
yeah,
especially if it meets everything.
yeah.
Unless he's
Yep.
asking for something, right? Like
Yeah,
he needed 2% green space and we were going to give it to him.
So yeah, so assuming under the kind of the fact pattern of he's not asking for anything, it meets all the requirements. Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner or Chairman Smallwood, Commissioner Costello, and others, you're correct. We can make suggestions. We can encourage them to change things informally, but we can't condition our approval on compliance with those suggestions. Now, as Commissioner Snow has pointed out, there are some times in which the applicant is requesting maybe a density bonus or to reduce green space or things along those lines, in which case you may have some more flexibility within reason. So, I mean, you're obviously not going to be able to say, hey, this is a horrible project, go back and start from scratch. But you may be able to say, we may be able to negotiate to give you a reduction if we can kind of figure out something, a better project for the city. Okay, so a developer has submitted 2 applications for the corner of Nicoletti Drive, and I'm going to slaughter this, Romani Drive, a rezone request, and a large-scale master plan. The developer is requesting that the 7200 South overlay be extended to his single-family properties. The developer wants to create a mixed-use development. The large-scale master plan complies with the ordinance. You like the concept, but don't think that this is the right location. You have to approve the rezone because the large-scale master plan complies with the ordinance.
No.
And why is that?
It's a legislative action again. With the rezone, we don't have to do it if we don't like it, pretty much.
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. So these are two separate decisions. The rezone application is a legislative decision. The large-scale master plan is an administrative decision. You only have to move forward with the large-scale master plan if the rezone is approved. I know, so I will say personally that we've had a couple projects come through in which they've done these joint applications where they're asking for a rezone and they're also trying to fast track things by also submitting other applications at the same time. For me, these are the hardest ones to sometimes keep straight because they'll do one presentation for both applications and it's really easy to kind of get lost in the minutia of both and be trying to figure out what am I allowed to approve or what am I required to approve? And then what is just kind of more of what do I still have discretion over? So our hope as staff is moving forward when you unfortunately continue to hear my voice come from the dark. Hopefully I will be helping remind you of what decisions you're making. So when we're seeing these mixed applications, I'm going to be trying to help remind you there's a legislative component and then there's the administrative component. Don't feel like you have to give in per se to the developer if you don't want to, but if you like the way that this is going, you have the discretion to be able to say, yes, I like this, or let's negotiate a little bit more about this because I have the commission has the discretion to say yes or no to that first necessary step before they get to the administrative step that may be demand approval or not.
Could I ask a question? Would this be considered spot zoning?
Probably not.
Okay.
And so this is the reason why. Let me see if I can play with any of these tools real quick. Here we go. Okay, can you see that on the map?
Uh-huh.
So this here is the overlay zone that already exists.
Okay.
If he were to, let's say, want to redevelop these properties because it's adjacent to that existing overlay, it wouldn't be spot zoning because he's asking it to come down. Now, if he were down here and asking for the overlay,
Yeah.
you're correct, Commissioner Castell, that would be a problem.
Yeah. Because I've always had a problem with, people that come in and they want a spot zone.
Yeah, and when it comes to things like our general plan, obviously when we're making zoning decisions, as Alex, Jana, and Jason have mentioned, when we make those rezone things, we still have to find certain findings. And that comes into play of if we're saying, here's this established neighborhood that we're trying to keep steady, we don't want to suddenly put clean industrial right in the middle of a residential zone or commercial or whatever it may be. So you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Okay, so now that you guys understand the difference between administrative and legislative decisions, I'm sure from here on out, it's going to be smooth sailing. You guys will be able to just thumbs up, thumbs down whenever you need to. But with that being said, we've gone about an hour and 10 minutes. So I know we're going to discuss some other things like ethics and open public meetings. But I know there are some other things that Alex wanted to discuss tonight. So I'm going to stop there. And at a future meeting, we'll kind of pick up from here. We'll talk about appeals and legal issues to consider as well, and then go into ethics and open public meetings. But thank you so much for your time. I hope you guys, so my role in relation to you, and I probably should have started out with this, my role as legal counsel for the city, you guys represent the city, and therefore I'm legal counsel to you as well. I'm legal counsel to you as a body, not to any of you individually. So unfortunately, if you come to me with wills and estates issues, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say I'm not qualified to do that. But also, I'm not your attorney in that respect. But
So
when
you
it comes,
can't help me when I steal the sign.
unfortunately, in that case, we might
On
have
my
to
own.
talk offline.
Garrett, I have a really quick question. So on
Absolutely.
80th South, we've got that project that keeps coming up. What are we trying to rezone and do? Are we trying to do both of those?
You're exactly right, Commissioner Anderson. And that's
Okay.
why, so when, and you guys probably can remember better than I do. I think it was the beginning of September when that was brought before you. You guys made the recommendation to deny the rezone request, and then tabled the administrative action of the large scale master plan to say,
Okay.
we'll review this depending on what the city council does.
Okay.
So if the
Thanks.
city council moves forward with it, we'll review the large scale master plan. If they don't, then that application kind of dies because they don't meet the minimum requirements.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. So any other questions I can answer for you? Okay, perfect. Well, again, I appreciate you having to listen to my monotone voice, and I'm sorry you'll have to listen to it again. I'm sorry you'll hear it a lot more in the future. But like I said, please reach out to me if you have questions about any of this. I'm going to send out an email at the end of the meeting with my contact information. So you'll have my office phone number, you'll have my cell phone number, and you'll have my email address. If you have questions, I'm here to help answer those questions along with Alex and the other staff here at the city. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Garrett. I appreciate that. That's really helpful and really informative. Okay, so we will move on to agenda item number 5, which is the Midvale City staff requesting a review and update to the Planning Commission bylaws and rules of procedure. So I'll let Alex take that away.
Hey, thanks, Chair. Garrett and I have been working on some recommendations that we have for the commission to update in the bylaws. As I mentioned, I've mentioned it a couple times in some past meetings that it's been in the works, and it worked out really nicely that we had Garrett's training and the bylaws happen kind of at once, because you hopefully, as we go through it, you can see some of the areas where we're trying to match the two together, the training and Garrett's recommendations in it, and then what the bylaws say. So I sent out in the packet just a draft that I had redlined that have all of the recommended changes that we put together for you. It's probably the lengthiest modification to the bylaws that we've had in a long time. So I'm totally fine if we want to take a few meetings to talk about what they mean. I think it'd be really helpful for any consideration of adoption of these to wait until after Garrett finishes the rest of the land use training, because that'll kind of fill out some of the last few pieces in there. And we'll work on scheduling that as we kind of look at what things are on the next few meeting agendas. But I just wanted to go through real quick to give you kind of an idea what these bylaws changes are proposing, and then talk over any questions or comments or concerns you might have in considering what they might mean for being on the Planning Commission. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I'm just going to run through these red lines. That's probably the easiest way to explain the logic behind them. So here's the bylaws. They are posted on the city's website, and Planning commissioners, when they are appointed, are expected to familiarize themselves with bylaws in addition to the zoning ordinance and whatever other rules and policies and procedures we can put in front of you. So there, it's organized into a series of sections that are based on, that have specific topics. First section looks at some general provisions, and then we look at appointment, conduct, organization, meetings, etc. Moving on through. In here, you can see that there are a few sections that have some dramatic changes, and then there are some sections that have fewer changes in them. And I'll just run through those real quick. In section 1, this section we keep updating because the state code keeps getting tweaked with respect to planning commission authority. There'll be relatively minor changes, like a handful of words get switched every couple of years. And it's been honestly just kind of a pain to go in there every year or two and just keep making these changes as the legislature makes changes. So I've proposed some revisions in here that speak more generally to what statutes and ordinances and such apply to the commission, so that we don't have to continually go in and revise them. And then also put in just some general expectations. So we have the authority comes from state code and city ordinance. There are a set of rules that the planning commission operates under, and the planning commission is expected to familiarize themselves with those rules and maintain that knowledge so that they can continue to serve in a good fashion. In section 2, this is a significant change to length that doesn't actually mean anything in practice. The language in this section was copied largely almost directly from the city ordinance. And so we've just proposed changing it to reference the city ordinance so we can update it in one place if it ever becomes necessary. This is where we define membership, members versus alternate members, appointment process, and some expectations from the city ordinance. We've also gone through, you'll see some of these minor changes. These are just some language updates and improvements that are intended to clarify responsibilities and duties in there, in the bylaws. And then we've made some changes to things like position titles. Like Leslie was the city planner. When I came on, my title was modified to planning director. So we're making those improvements. In the training session, we originally had a requirement for commissioners to complete a land use training within the first 6 months of being on the commission, and then commissioners were encouraged to complete additional trainings or attend other educational opportunities later on. We're proposing here to have commissioners mandate commissioners complete a land use training at least every 2 years, and then are further encouraged to attend other opportunities. The legislature likes to change things when it comes to zoning ordinances now on an annual basis. So we want to make sure that we have opportunities to keep the commissioners up to speed on everything that's happened, everything that's changed. And then also just make sure that if, for instance, we don't talk about a topic for a year or two, that you don't end up getting so rusty that the next time it comes up, it's a problem. We will and do provide opportunities for those as we find them. Like I emailed out some opportunities earlier this month or last month, and then we have Garrett working on this land use training we just went through. We'll continue to have training sessions like this one in the future, and as we get through them, we can start kind of streamlining them to talk about relevant topics or summarize a little more expeditiously the things that we're discussing. In conduct, we've brought it in line with what other city employees are expected to, or how other city employees are expected to conduct themselves, just by referencing this policies and procedures manual. This is also available on our website, and I can give you a copy if anybody would like to see it more directly. And then to further expand on general conduct, we've added a few sections in this section 3. First, the commission is intended to serve the public interest. Public interest is a very broad term. So the idea being that you're looking out for the general welfare of the entire city and all of those people that occupy or visit it. It's not necessarily limited to trying to serve a particular person's interests or a particular group's interests. It's more generalized than that. But we wanted to make it clear that this is an expectation for the Planning Commission, as is the responsibility to ensure opportunities for participation. We do, in the zoning ordinance and in state code, have requirements for public hearings that document how and when and why we hold public hearings, and we want to make sure that the Planning Commission embraces their opportunities to engage in the public in those processes. As Garrett mentioned, not all of those comments will be things that we can use when it comes time to make decisions, but they will all be helpful and hopefully keep the public interested in planning and being involved in the city. There's some improvements to the conflict of interest language, and you can read through that if you'd like. We've also added this section about ex parte communication. Garrett mentioned that it's really important that commissioners not engage in ex parte communication because we want everything that contributes to a decision to be reflected on the record. And so here we're making it clear that we want commissioners to not engage in that communication and to make sure that the information that is considered is only the information that's on the record. In related to both ex parte communication and the conflict of interest changes, we've got this expanded disclosure requirement, which says it gives a few instances under which commissioners must disclose activities related to operating business within the city. These are when commissioners are appointed, they are required to complete these disclosure forms at the beginning of their appointment. And this also makes it clear that there's an ongoing obligation to update those statements as potential conflicts or conflicts arise. So if you have questions about this, please talk to Garrett or I, and we can make sure to resolve any sorts of concerns about that. The second part of this is a recusal requirement. So if there are ex parte communications or conflicts of interest on a specific agenda item, then we now have this language, or we're proposing to add this language in here that would mandate a recusal for a commissioner that is in that situation. So it's that we're making it clear here that these are very important topics to disclose and to address. And I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a penalty, but it is an attempt to make sure that the record remains clear and objective and that the public trust can be maintained when we're handling these types of potentially delicate conversations.
And Alex, if I can jump in real quick.
Please.
So the only part that we're changing, you already have the obligation, whether under state law, to recuse yourself if you have a conflict of interest. So that's not changing at all. The only part that's going to be changing is recusing yourself when you've engaged in ex parte communication.
Thanks for that clarification. Okay, we also have a new media statement in here, which is basically the commissioners should not talk to the media individually, and they should encourage the media to consider the meeting minutes if they have questions, or refer them to our information officer. That's Laura Magnus, and if you haven't met her, she has come in to do some social media and communications trainings, and I'd be happy to bring her back again if there's some interest in doing that. And then finally, there is an expectation to maintain impartiality, which in this case is specifically referring to public statements before a public hearing is considered, or before a public hearing on a particular agenda item. So for instance, don't go out and post on social media that you hate somebody's project before they've had an opportunity to tell you about it in a public meeting. That's not a good look. We have added, related to that conflict of interest and ex parte topic, this additional responsibility for the chair to inquire about those when necessary. So it's not necessary to do it in every meeting, but the chair is given that responsibility to make sure that those items are addressed. Got some other minor technical changes. We are removing the address in here just in case we end up moving the location of the meetings in the future. We are required under state law to publish the location of meetings on agendas when those are noticed or published. So we handle that on the staff level. We don't necessarily need it in here. And then one of the other potential changes that we've talked about in passing in prior meetings is looking at moving the meeting time. So currently we have the second and fourth Wednesdays starting at 7 p.m. and running until 10:30 p.m., after which time the Planning Commission has to vote to continue the meeting. Here, this is proposing to move it to 6 and then 9:30. So it's just moving it up an hour and trying to potentially get those meetings done a little earlier than some of these like 10:30, 11:30 meetings we've been having lately. If this is problematic, it's not a hard request. We can keep it at 7 if the commission would like to do that. This is just an option that we wanted to propose if the commission was interested in getting done a little earlier. Some more technical changes, clarification on the field trips, that comments aren't accepted during a field trip. And then the public is encouraged to present their comments during the meeting that's usually held immediately after. In the quorum and voting sections, we've again just referenced the city code where that language is originally drawn from. In the meeting order of business, the chair mentioned at some point in passing that it might be worth bringing meeting minutes earlier into the process so that we can get those out of the way up front and move on to other more important topics afterwards. So we've got that proposal in here just to rearrange the order of meeting minutes. That 9:30 time change for the end I mentioned. And then Garrett mentioned providing placing items on agendas for discussion. So we've added some language in here that talks about when we will do that as staff. The Planning Commission is ultimately in charge of its meetings, and we've got the bylaws here to document how those meetings will be held. What we've put in here is that the chair or a majority of commissioners may request an item to be added on a future meeting agenda. We do want to make sure that we're not investing resources into a project that may not have support. So we do have some discretionary language in here for staff to say, hey, look, we appreciate that you have that concern, but we don't have the resources available to explore it right now. We'll bring it up to the council as a budget request, and then we can look at getting into that later. That's like, if you tried to ask me to amend the general plan, I'd have to tell you that's not going to happen anytime soon because we just don't have the budget for it. But it's good to know if there are requests like that so that we can pass them along to the city council and start planning for them on the budget side. We've added, in response to the electronic meetings that we've been having all year, we've added some language in here that talks about when we can hold those. And then also the chair is allowed to make adjustments to the order of business if necessary, just so that those meetings can happen. And then finally, under abstention, we're clarifying the abstention policy in here and indicating when a member can abstain from voting, and otherwise saying that members are expected to vote, so that commissioners understand that they do need to vote even if they don't want to vote, unless there is a perception of a conflict of interest, but it's not actually a conflict of interest, as an example. Okay, I promised I'd try and go through that somewhat quickly, and I feel like I have, so I'm sure there are questions. Please hit me.
I have no questions. I read through it pretty intensively. Like the 6 o'clock, I think that will be better. At least it doesn't conflict with anything I have. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels though.
Yeah, 6 o'clock would be fine with me.
I can barely make 7, so 6 will work.
When you say you can barely make 7, do you mean?
I'm teasing because I forgot tonight.
Okay. Like, please, I don't want it to feel like I'm trying to kick anybody off the commission because they can't meet earlier than 7. So that makes me a little nervous to hear that, but okay, good to hear.
So I have a question.
Makes no difference to me what time, so.
Yeah, it doesn't affect me the time. So if we were to have questions or anything, how would we do that going forward?
Questions on these proposed amendments or on, well, I'm happy to try and answer any right now.
Okay.
I can also, if the commission would prefer, I can say over the next couple of weeks, send me your questions and comments. And then when we have another meeting on this topic, I can bring them up and try and answer them all at once.
That's what I was anticipating. Yeah, because Garrett said he's going to do more training and you want to kind of to wait on this. And this is kind of an introduction.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
okay. I wanted clarification on that.
Yep. Yeah. No, I'm not proposing this as something for you to adopt tonight. So I would like, if possible, for this to be, if the commission is on board with these changes, to have them adopted by the end of the year, so that when we do our schedule for 2021, we can account for anything that might have changed in that schedule. But that leaves us 2 more meetings that we can talk about this. And then if it does get pushed past that, if it does end up taking longer than those 2 additional meetings this year, then that's fine. We can handle that very easily.
How do the other commissioners feel about the 6 o'clock meeting change?
I'm good with it. It gives me enough time during the day to go steal that sign. I've got to have daylight, you know.
Oh, Robin, public record.
Did you not learn anything, Robin?
Alex, I do have one question. So let's say my daughter bought my dad's home and they wanted to rezone it. It's right off of State Street in Midvale. So I'd have to recuse myself, right?
Garrett has a better understanding of that than I do. Perhaps I'll let him answer that question.
I would need to look at the specifics, but more than likely, yes.
Okay.
So, or at a minimum, you would probably want to abstain. So Utah's definition of a conflict of interest is relatively narrow, and we'll kind of go through all that. That is probably close enough that it would require recusal. But like I said, at a minimum, it would probably require you to abstain.
Okay. I got it. I guess it's close enough if my daughter and dad are involved. That might be close enough. Okay. Thanks, Garrett. I'm just getting more and more in trouble, aren't I?
That's not a problem. It's not an issue for you to have to abstain, as long as you're clear about what's happening. The issue arises when that recusal or abstention that should happen doesn't. So
okay. All right.
We have that language in here, and the idea is that commissioners participate as much as possible, but we, like I mentioned before, we want to make sure we're as transparent as possible to maintain the trust in the institution.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have people on the city council, for instance, who own businesses here within the city, and that's not a problem. In fact, I mean, that's the types of input we're looking for in making these decisions as a whole. But we also don't want people using their privileges based on their office, for instance, to be able to get certain benefits that a member of the public would have access to themselves.
Okay. Thank you.
So let me propose this for you. The agenda for the next meeting does not appear to be particularly lengthy. So I think we can finish, assuming Garrett's available and ready, we can finish the land use training in that meeting, and then we can continue to talk about these bylaws changes. And then perhaps we can look at, in the December meeting, considering adopting them if everybody's questions and concerns have been addressed. So that'd give you a little over a month to contemplate and digest what's being proposed here, and then also consider it against what Garrett has been giving you for training. And then if everybody's ready for it, in that December meeting, I also anticipate having the schedule brought up. So if we do go forward with that 6 o'clock time, then we can put the schedule together accordingly.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to move forward. So
Okay. I'll put that on my schedule.
Okay. I know that we have one meeting in November and one in December. What are the dates on those?
So we actually have 2 on the schedule in November, but I don't think we'll hold the second one. November's are the 18th and the 25th. So that the 25th is the day before Thanksgiving. I don't think anybody's going to be in a mood to want to do a meeting on that night.
So we're looking at the 18th.
Yep. So we'll plan on the 18th, and then December is December 9th.
December the 9th?
Yep.
Okay.
all right. So if there aren't any other questions regarding the bylaws right now,
I've got one quick one. Are alternates involved in making that decision too? To the bylaws update?
That's a good point. Garrett, I don't know that you have any reason to know this off the top of your head, but do you? Because I was not involved the last time the bylaws were updated.
I wasn't either. But I don't know if it's addressed in the bylaws from when I read them in this process. And I think that's an excellent point that should be addressed in the bylaws. So yeah. Alex and I will work on that. But I would guess, just like the city council, that anytime it's impacting all of the members, that alternate should be included in that decision-making process as well.
I think the last time when we talked about it with Leslie last year, I think that they did have the alternates. I think the alternates did participate in that. That's just from memory, though.
Yeah, we'll add something that clarifies that into the next version. I also found a couple typos that I needed to fix. So if you spot any typos, or if you have any questions that you want me to address the next time we talk about this, please feel free to email them over to me at any time in the next couple weeks, and then I can address them all at once.
Isn't that Candy's job?
That's everybody's job.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right. So with that, we'll move on to any updates or, project updates, things like that.
I've got a few, but I'll make them quick. So I sent out a week or two ago an open meetings training module that the city recorder asked all of the commissioners complete. I've gotten some responses from a couple folks, and the rest of you, I'd like to see if you could get that done for me by the end of the week.
Could you resend that to me?
Yeah, I can send it out to everybody again.
I think that was my stint in the hospital.
I think you're right, but you're not the only one, so don't feel bad.
Oh, okay.
I'll send that link out again, so those of you that haven't been able to finish it can get that wrapped up. Garrett's going to talk about open meetings again in the next training session. So the one that I'm sending out is like an 8-minute video that goes over the Open and Public Meetings Act really briefly. Hey, look at that. Robin's got it done. Speaking of certificates, when you get it done, please send me a copy of that certificate so I can pass it along to our city recorder. Second, just as a heads up, the soccer facility project that we talked about last meeting, I received notice on Monday has been canceled. So it was disappointing. That one's not moving forward. Wasatch is looking at new uses for that area, so we will definitely have them come back with a new proposal for that when they're ready. The Midvale Mills project, that one on 80th that we mentioned really briefly earlier, the council held a public hearing on that one and decided to table it and hold a second public hearing. because the applicant indicated that he was willing to modify the plans if it made it more palatable to the commission or the council. So his proposal now, he's taken off the townhome portion and he's limiting it to just the single family home portion. So that will anticipate we'll go back in front of the council next month or December, just depending on when we can get those plans updated and get it rescheduled. We do have to renotice that one because they did want it as a public hearing again. And then I've talked over the last few meetings about some ordinance and procedural updates that we've been going through for the subdivision and the master plan development processes. For the subdivision language, I took the feedback that we heard from the Planning Commission and the council, and Jason and I are working on some updates to the subdivision title in the city code. That's Title 16. We're looking at modifying the process, clarifying some of the requirements, and expanding it to cover some changes that have happened in state code in the years since it was originally adopted. And on the master plan development side, we are going back to the council in about 2 weeks to talk about some options and see kind of what they would like us to pursue. And then after we get that done, we'll bring back a text amendment to the Planning Commission for you to consider. At this rate, probably December, if not January. And that's it. I'm not going to blather on this time.
Okay. Well, thank you for providing that information. That was really helpful. With that, I would entertain a motion so that I can go eat my lasagna.
I make a motion
Make a
that
motion
we
to adjourn at, what time is it?
9:16.
At 9:16 p.m.
All right. Any opposed?
I second it.
Okay, great. Then we are adjourned at 9:16 p.m.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Yeah. You
Yay.
too.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Candace.